Hi everybody. Now I'm going to read chapter 8 from The Fields of Home. It's a story that takes place right here in Maine. It takes place a long time ago, back around 1912, I would say. Now this is for Bert and Cora and Susanna and Katie especially, and for anybody else who happens to be watching and listening. Chapter 8, New Tricks. The next morning, I did the chores just the way I had done them every morning since I'd been at grandfather's. First, I slopped the sow that had the little pigs, fed and watered the hogs in the barn cellar, and curried the bay mare while she ate her corn. Then I tackled the yellow colt. While I'd been dressing, I decided I wouldn't start to Colorado for another day, or maybe 2. Before I went, I wanted to let Uncle Levi see that I wasn't quite as useless as grandfather had told him I was. I couldn't show him very well with a scythe, but if I could keep the yellow colt under control, I could show him with the horses. Maybe I was thinking too much about keeping the yellow colt under control when I went into a stall that morning. Maybe I was a little too rough with him. He fought me harder than he ever had. There were times when I was really frightened before he stopped kicking and put his head down for the bridle. I just slipped a bit into his mouth when, from the stall door, Uncle Levi said, "Sort of early to be harnessing up, ain't it?" I tried to act as if I'd known he was there all the time, but my voice sounded a little shaky when I said, I wasn't harnessing him for work, but I've got to teach him to stand for harnessing without an hour's fight every morning. As soon as he understands that he won't get any breakfast till it's all over, he'll learn quick enough. Kind of hard to learn an old dog new tricks, ain't it? Yes, but he'll learn, I said. How old is he anyway? His mouth looks as smooth as a range bull's. Been smooth more years than you be old. Let me see. I was 64 last spring. I fetched old Nancy home the day I turned 30. Seems to me she didn't have a colt that next year, and foaled the yellow colt the following spring. Might be a year later, I ain't real sure. By that time I was off to Dakota, homesteading. How old did that make him? 31 or 32, I said. Great day of judgment. Cussed contrary old critter. Born ugly and never got over it. Calculate we better get at the rest of the chores before we have Thomas out here to boss the job. Thomas, he's a little long on the bossing sometimes. Like as not, he learned it when he was a sergeant in the rebellion. They're all done except milking one cow and feeding the calf, I told him. Grandfather doesn't want the milking done until 6 o'clock. I wonder why he doesn't milk the other 3 cows instead of letting those big calves run with them. Thomas, he said, if 'twas left for Thomas to do, there wouldn't be no milking. Never heard tell of him milking a cow. Women folks always done it. Millie gets her back up at more than 1 cow to milk. Cussed good girl, Millie. Don't know how Thomas would go on without her. As he spoke, Uncle Levi took his big gold watch out of the bib pocket of his overalls, untied the little leather pouch he kept it in, and said, right on the button, 6 o'clock, straight up. Then he followed me into the tie-up. The milk was still wringing off the bottom of the bucket when Uncle Levi bought a little wooden firkin and sat down behind Clarabelle. In a couple of minutes, old Bess came in and sat down beside him. Then, from one direction and another, the 3 cats came and sat beside Bess. For 2 or 3 minutes, the only sounds were the occasional meowing of a cat and the whisper of the milk streams as they plunged into the foam. The bucket was a third full when I remembered that I hadn't shot the usual squirt of milk at Bess. I reached high on the milk bag, brought down a big teatful, and turned my fist up toward Bess's head. As the white stream came toward her, she opened her mouth wide and caught it. There's an old dog that's been taught a new trick, I told Uncle Levi. She didn't know how to do that when I came down here. Clever, ain't she? Was all he said for a minute. Then, how are you and Thomas getting on, Ralphie? Not very well, I guess. Mostly I've only had hand mowing to do, and I'm not very good at it, especially right-handed. I never tried to use the scythe before I came down here, and I can't always make it go right where I want it to. He says I'm more hindrance than help to him, but I worked for a good many different men in Colorado. They'd all hire me back again. Could always get jobs when most of the other kids in Littleton couldn't. What's this business about the strawberries and tomatoes? Oh, that? I don't know why you got mad about that. I just told him I worked for a man in Colorado who raised strawberries and tomatoes. Did you? Yes, sir. How'd you get along with him? You mean the man that raises strawberries and tomatoes? Mm-hmm. Fine, but I only worked for him when there weren't any cattle jobs. We had a horse. I could make more driving cattle. What did you do for the man? Oh, quite a few different jobs, like picking fruit and setting out tomato plants in the spring, setting the new runners on the strawberry plants for the next year's rows. You know, you don't have to set out new strawberry plants every year. Little new leaves come at the ends of the runners. You just move them over like wires to where you want the next year's row. Then you put a handful of dirt on the runner, right near the little leaves, but so you don't bury them. And after the field is irrigated, the roots grow down from the new leaves. Then you've got a new plant, and when fall comes, you can plow up the old row. The man I worked for had a high, warm field, just like the one up beyond the orchard that has all the stones on it. And never got late frost in the spring. We could set his tomato plants out 2 weeks earlier than anybody else could, set theirs out. So his tomatoes were always the first ones to ripen anywhere around Denver. He used to get as much as 10 cents a pound for them. I was going to tell him why we always had the early strawberries too, but he said, "You done pretty good with the yellow colt this morning. Who learned you to handle horses?" "Oh, Father and quite a few other men. Hi Beckman and Mr. Batchelor. He taught me how to break and train a cow horse. Oh, Hi taught me how to break and train a cow horse, but Mr. Batchelor was more of a trader. He taught me some of the tricks about balky horses, and I've been using one of them on the yellow colt. It works all right.
Keep reading.
I just tie his ears together good and tight with a piece of soft wire. Then, after I've let him stand and shake his head till he's only thinking about his ears and has forgotten he's balking, I cut to him and he walks right along. I think I'll have him cured of balking altogether pretty soon. Shame the Almighty stood a man's ears on his head the way he did, ain't it? Makes them so cussed hard to wire together. Here's the pan for your cat's milk. You've been dry stripping there for the past 5 minutes. By the time I had the calf fed and had gone to the house, breakfast was all on the table. The spicy smell of frying sausage met me at the door of the summer kitchen. Millie was whisking a pan of hot biscuits out of the oven, called to me to get my face and hands washed as fast as the Lord would let me. Grandfather and Uncle Levi were already in their places at the table when they finished washing. Uncle Levi was curling the ends of his big mustache and smacking his lips the way Mother did when she was tasting a new batch of mincemeat. That breakfast was really something to smack your lips over. Instead of the oatmeal and fried salt pork we'd had every other morning, there was a platter loaded with fried eggs and good big sausage cakes, a nappy of fried potatoes, a plate of hot biscuits, and a jar of wild strawberry jam. Most of the talk during breakfast was about people Uncle Levi knew but hadn't seen for a long time. I'd never heard of any of them, so I paid most of my attention to biscuits, sausage, and eggs. Just as I was finishing my 4th egg and 6th biscuit, Millie got up and opened the oven door. As she gathered up the corners of her apron for holders and brought out a high-crusted pie, she snapped, "There's your devilish old apple pie, Levi. Never seen a man that set store on pie for breakfast. It don't look to be up to my usual." Millie sounded as cranky as she did sometimes when she was scolding at me, but it didn't worry Uncle Levi. He bounced out of his chair as if there had been a spring in it, threw both arms around Millie's neck, and danced around in a circle. "Levi, Levi," she kept squawking. "Good Lord sakes alive, what ails you? You ain't been nipping at that bottle already this morning, have you? Leave me be, Levi, before you get my hair looking like a rat's nest." Uncle Levi took one arm loose, pulled Millie up tight against him, and spanked her a good sharp one. "That'll learn you to sass your elders," he told her as he swung her around again. But they were both laughing when they came back to the table. If there was anything the matter with the apple pie, I didn't find it. Nobody else did either. Grandfather was only half finished with the sausage and eggs, but he pushed his plate right back, dished a big slab of hot apple pie under his tea saucer. He seemed to have caught some of Uncle Levi's excitement, and as he waved his knife with a mouthful of pie on it, sang out, "By gory, Levi, we'll make the hay fly now. With 3 stout hands of us, we'll have it all fetched into the mouths come Sunday fortnight. I and Ralphie will grind the scythe while you're putting new teeth in the hen sweeps." I'd never seen hand sweeps, and I didn't think much of them when I did see them. They were hay rakes about 4 feet wide, with 8-inch wooden teeth, a handle that looked like a short, slim wagon tongue. The ones grandfather had must have been 100 years old. The handles had been worn thin, and they were weathered almost black. A quarter of the teeth were broken, and where bolts were missing, they were hitched together with rusty wire. When grandfather got them down from the carriage house attic, Uncle Levi's mouth went the way it did when he was looking at the breakfast. And then he almost hollered, "By Hub Thomas, why in tarnation don't you take a little care with your tools? It's a God's wonder they hold together twixt one time and another when I come down here." Grandfather yelled back from the attic, "They held together all right while you was off homesteading in Dakota. By fire, if you don't want to fix them, go off and do something else. I didn't want to be there if they were going to fight, so I wandered off toward the barn. The blisters on my hands were pretty sore. I didn't feel as if it'd be a bit of fun to drag one of those hand sweeps all around the orchard. I'd noticed a couple of broken down old horse rakes lying with the other junk machinery out behind the sheep barn, and I went down there to look them over. One of them was a complete wreck. Looked as if it had been run over by a freight train. But the other wasn't too bad. One of the wheels had been smashed, the tongue was broken, 5 or 6 teeth were missing, and it had been robbed of nuts and bolts. I looked it all over carefully. There didn't seem to be much the matter with it that couldn't be fixed in a few hours. One of the wheels on the wrecked one was in pretty good shape, just bent a little, but it could be heated and hammered straight. The funny thing was that the lift handle was missing from both machines, and somebody had taken the trip gears off the better one, put them back onto the wrong ends of the axle. When I went back to the carriage house, Uncle Levi had split a maple block into little sticks that looked like kindling. He'd pushed the junk on the bench back away from the vise, had one of the little sticks in it, and was shaping it carefully with a spoke shave. Grandfather had driven the broken off teeth out of the sweeps, and just as I came into the carriage house, he snapped, "Let be, Levi, let be. Time flies. Just whittle the shanks down a dite and drive 'em home tight." I only let Uncle Levi get as far as, "Thomas, it's a God's wonder," before I said, "Couldn't we fix up one of those old horse rakes down by the sheep barn? About as easy as to make new teeth for the hand sweeps. One of them down there doesn't look too bad, and—" "Worthless, worthless," Grandfather hollered at me. "Ain't nothing but junk." Then he let his voice down, almost to a whisper, and his whiskers moved up so I knew he was smiling. "Got 'em to boot in a couple of heifer trades. Calculate they'll fetch $5-6 from a junk peddler." Uncle Levi laid the spoke shave down so the cutting edge was against the board wall. He'd put his glasses on. He peered up over them when he asked me, "Did you look 'em over careful, Ralphie?" I just nodded, and Uncle Levi started out the doorway. I went with him as far as the corner of the barn, while Grandfather shouted after us, "They ain't no good, I tell you, Levi. Ain't one of 'em worth a tinker. I tried mending one of them myself, but it won't work. Worthless, worthless, I tell you. Ralphie, Ralphie." Uncle Levi didn't pay any attention until Grandfather called my name. Then he stopped and said to me, "Ain't no God's wonder it don't work if Thomas tried to fix it. You better go back there before he blows a gasket." Grandfather scolded me plenty for mentioning the horse rakes to Uncle Levi. Told me to keep my long nose out of things that were none of my business. Then he had me turn the grindstone while he sharpened the scythe, and he bored down on them so hard the stone turned like a windlass. Uncle Levi was gone quite a while, but when he came back he didn't say a word about the horse rakes. He just began raising the dickens about all the junk on top of the workbench. Just as we were finishing the second scythe, he slammed things around on the bench and shouted, "By Hub Thomas, I ain't gonna fix your cussed sweeps, nor another tarnation thing around here till I got a decent place to work. And I don't lay out to clean the junk off this bench myself neither. It's a God's wonder you ain't fetched home every dump twixt here and Bangor. Where in Tunget did you get it all? Auctions?" "It's all good stuff. It's all good stuff, I tell you," Grandfather shouted back. "Ain't worth a tinker, none of it. Can't find a usable nut or bolt no place amongst it. If you want them sweeps mended, I'll have to go to the falls and get some stove bolts for 'em." Wasting," Grandfather exploded. "There's plenty of good nuts and bolts right there at your hand. Threw them in there myself just the other day. If you can't find them, Ralphie will find them for you." Then he slammed the sharpened scythe blade on the floor and stamped out of the carriage house. As soon as Grandfather had gone, Uncle Levi winked at me. kind of bucky on us fixing up that cussed horse rake, wasn't he? And we ain't going to be able to tie his ears together neither. Calculate we're going to cook up some other way around it. Let's see now. Tomorrow's the Sabbath, ain't it? Thomas, he has his troubles with the Sabbath. It's again his scruples to work on it, and he won't set you on a job of work to do on it. That is, except in chores. Sometimes he's a mite careless about the line where chores leaves off and a job of work begins. Never heard tell of him raising much ruction of somebody done him a job of work on the Sabbath without him knowing of it. It might happen we could get Thomas out of the way tomorrow and run a little horse rake mending and on the chores. It's going to take a lot of nuts and bolts and things to fix it, I said. You think I'll find enough of the right kind among the stuff here on the bench? What do you think I'm going to the village for? I got plenty of stove bolts for the sweeps right down there in that locked drawer. As he spoke, Uncle Levi unbuttoned the cuff of one of his shirt sleeves. When he turned it back, the inside was all mapped over the figures. There they be, he told me. Don't allow I miss so much as a cotter pin or a washer. Keep your nose clean while I'm gone. Don't rear into this mess of junk too hard. It'll take a month of Sundays to get it all sorted out. I was scared Thomas would set you to mowing, and your hands ain't fit for it right now. It was more than 2 hours before Uncle Levi came back from Lisbon Falls. By that time, I'd made a pretty good hole in stuff on the workbench, and Grandfather hadn't once come up from whatever he was doing down at the beehives. He did come up when Uncle Levi drove back into the yard, was standing by the front wheel of the spring wagon when I went to unhitch old Nell. There you be, Thomas, Uncle Levi said, as he passed the reins to me in a flat package to Grandfather. Them ought to hold smoke enough to make every bee in Lisbon Township peaceable. Seen 'em when I was looking for carriage bolts. Calculated you might have some good use to put 'em to. Gory sakes alive, Levi, Grandfather sang out as he fumbled the little bellows out of the package. It was made of brown leather with bright tips and handles. Shouldn't ought to have spent so much money on a tannel pair of bellows. Little court plaster would have mended up the old ones so they do with me all right. Gory sakes alive, ain't them beauties? Ralphie, you want to hitch the horse whilst I go get my smoke pot a burning? I gotta. By that time he was so far away toward the bee shop, and I couldn't overhear what he was saying. Uncle Levi winked at me again. Calculated he might have a few bees that would need some smoking about now. No sense starting into the fields before noon. This'll give us time to do a decent job on them hand sweeps. I noticed a good-sized box under the seat with a Lewiston Sunday paper laid in over the top. There was a roll of something wrapped in brown paper. It was about 3 feet long and as big around as my head. Uncle Levi climbed down, rolled the round package up from under the seat, and pulled the box to the edge of the wagon. Found about everything we'll need, except in heist handle and shafts, and I allow we're smart enough between us to make them out of hardwood. I'll fetch this stuff to the carriage house while you hand harness old Nell. I was just leading her away toward the man when he called, "Hold up a minute, Ralphie. By hub, I'm near to forgetting it. Fetch you something for them sore hands. Catch." He tossed the package, and as it wobbled toward me, end over end, a pair of brown gloves spilled out right at my feet. They were as soft as a woman's kid gloves, as smooth as satin, both inside and out. When I tried to tell him how much I liked them, he grumbled, "No thank yous, no thank yous. Got them for you, not for thank yous," and went off to the carriage house. That's the end of that chapter.
That's a pretty good chapter.
Read another one soon.
Wasn't that a nice chapter?